Wizards, spellcasters, magic users, whatever you call them, you're going to need some in your army. And the Slaves to Darkness have a couple of options. And there's one that I just wanted to paint, even though I think I can use it, but I think the circumstances are particularly esoteric, to say the least, just like the model. And to find out what that is, you're going to have to wait until after this. Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm Wayne. Thanks again for joining me. I hope you're enjoying the Slaves to Darkness series. We're really starting to get the core of a solid army here, and I'm starting to be really happy with how it's turning out. But we're going to need some magic users. Chaos magic is a fickle beast, and as such, I thought I'd do not one, not two, not even three, but 4 different magic users. That's right, magic users then. Let's talk about them for a moment, shall we? As I've said before, this is a Slaves to Darkness army, and it's supposed to be unaligned as such. Painting-wise, I'm going to paint these pretty similar to how we've already painted the Chaos Knights and the Chaos Chosen. So I won't go too into detail on the armored versions of it, but what I will do is show you the different coloured OSL effect. The last one, that's the interesting one for me. I'm not entirely sure I can use this properly without having some weird army composition, but it's the Myrmidon. Is it Theridin Myrmidon? The Wizardy Bull guy, yeah, who I'm going to align to Tzeentch. I didn't want to deviate too far away from the overall colour scheme of the army that we've already established. That said, as I mentioned, I'm going to use basically the same recipe as I have for my Chaos Knights and the Chaos Chosen. I'm going to have a unifying theme in the colour of the robes. How that's going to work is I'm just going to have a gradient from dark red to a blue, and that's what's going to kind of make the wizard stand out, other than the Myrmidon, which, well, I'm going to cover that in a separate section in this video. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Let's just jump in and see what we can do, all right? Well, that wasn't the most fun recording that intro. That was the second time I recorded it, and it just got worse and worse and worse. So I'm just going to jump straight in with the Thaumaturge. Yeah, that's right, not the Myrmidon. Sorry about that, guys. Right, so what we're going to do then, well, let's have a quick chat. Now, you'll notice that I've already got it to a reasonable starting point using the techniques we've already built on in the previous videos. So do skip back and have a watch of those and then come back to this video if you're not already familiar with what we've done. We've basically just done a mix of slap chop and basic underpainting techniques. The metals followed the same recipe that we've already established. The bone and the wooden handle is exactly the same as we've already used. Let's not waste any time then and crack on with the important part. Okay then, so I want to get a red into blue look to this guy. Now, the Thaumaturge is traditionally aligned to Tzeentch, I believe. I'm not overly familiar with this character, but it is a cool sculpt and I want to give it a go. So I'm going to start off with a contrast paint, Sigvald Burgundy, going into Talissar Blue. Now I'm going to get this on my palette and I'm going to really start to thin it. And I'm going to do the entire thing in brushwork. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but we'll see. Okay, so on the palette, we've got the Sigvald Burgundy and the Talissar Blue. As you can see, I've only used a tiny amount because this paint is super, super pigmented. It is very saturated, so we're going to want to thin this down. And what I'm going to do here on the palette is just start to have a quick play and figure out where I want the color values to lie on that spectrum that I'm going to paint it from. Now we're going to try it with the burgundy at the top and the blue at the bottom. That's sort of what I want to carry over, and I want the ends of the arms to be blue as well. Yet this is a bit of a callback to the Soul Blight Gravelords and how I painted some of those on the vampire skin. So if you want to see the reasoning behind that, do go and have a look, but this is going to have a magic slant on it. So I'm fairly happy with where I am now. So let's just grab the model and start slinging some paint on it. Now, you do need to work fast with contrasts. Otherwise, you are going to end up with some banding. Not ideal, but yeah, you could run it through the airbrush. However, for this, I think I'm just going to use the brush because, well, we always use the airbrush and we'll probably end up using it later on. But for now, let's just get this skin done. Okay, what I am doing here is I'm going to wet my brush before I dip it in the paint as well, and that's really going to give me a very thin saturation of it, and I will have to do multiple coats, but that's okay. Just be careful when you're using this sort of technique that you don't tear the paint. Now, what I mean by don't tear the paint is as your paint is drying, if you go back over it and pull in a direction, any direction, it doesn't matter, you will start to get texturing and what's called tearing of the paint as it's starting to emulsify and create the actual layer of color on the model. That'll start to introduce nasty textures. So try to work in one direction and be patient. These thin layers dry super fast, so do bear that in mind. And if you want to increase the saturation, come back in after the fact, put another layer on it. And because it's basically glaze consistency, that's what you need to do. And you'll get a really nice, smooth transition. I'm going to get this color all over the entire model in the first instance, and then we're going to work up from there with blue, with it being a little bit darker. Having the burgundy underneath is going to give us a really nice blend from the blue into the red via purple and some other shades there, some fuchsias. With the blue then, we're going to start off at the bottom and we're going to work our way up. Now, in this first instance, I'm working really, really thin. The reason for that is exactly as we explained before. Now, normally what I would want to do is, as I'm starting to build up this color gradient and we know where the darkest points are going to be, which are going to be the end of the model, so the bottom of the legs, the end of the arm, then I'm going to start moving my brush in a very specific direction. I'm going to place it on the model where I want the gradient to be lightest, and I'm going to lift it off of the model where I want it to be darkest. I'm not doing that right now. The reason being, as I said before, my brush is very, very wet, and that's allowing me to feather between the two colors. Once I've done this stage and we start to build up the darkness of the blue, that's where I will start to work in that very specific direction, being conscious all the time of that's what I'm wanting to do. What you don't want to do is end up switching direction midway and ending up with a darker point mid-gradient, because that can be very hard to fix, especially when you've got a dark color that's really highly saturated like this blue. The skin pretty much done. I'm going to start giving some detail to the face as well now. This is where I want to start paying attention to what I'm doing, making sure I'm in control of my brush strokes, and you'll notice that I've dropped down in size of brush while I work on this detailed area. I am using my wet palette again, and that red that I used previously, the Sigvold Burgundy, I'm mixing in with some ivory white, and that's going to give me something of a highlight color, and I'll do exactly the same thing with the blue, giving me a purple as well. So I'm working the way through the range. I can't give you any ratios here because it depends how thickly you put your paints on, but what I do want to do is just make sure that I'm using something that's sympathetic to the color palette that I've already got, and those tones are carrying through. It may look a little bit bright now, but don't worry, it dries a little bit more muted. And I'm picking out where I think will look best. So around the mouth, ridges on the head and nose, just as you would with a normal model. It's just a little bit easier because it's a little bit bigger, isn't it? And also don't forget the eyes. Those can be a challenge at times, but I'm sure you'll get there with them. Taking this opportunity to make sure that I get the details that I want in black to be black, so around on the belt, much like we did with the Chaos Lords, but also I'm going to base anything black that I want to be metallic. So he's got a couple of earrings in there, and there's another couple of necklaces, so I'm going to get black on those and come back in with the silver. Let's not forget his horns either. I want to add a little bit of black towards the tips, or what would be the tips, because we've got those metal spikes on there, and I want to do the same thing with the staff. Now, all we're going to do here is I'm going to use some thinned down black contrast paint, and basically it's the same technique that we've used on the body. We're going to use a very wet brush and we're going to feather it, lifting up towards the darkest point, so in this case towards the tip, and we're just going to use layering basically to do this. Let it dry, come back, use a slightly smaller throw, so closer to the horn, and that will build up the saturation of the black, giving it that nice dark gradient effect without the need for an airbrush or anything like that. Super easy. Just take your time. Remember, don't rip your paint. Silver then, anything that you've got at hand will do. I've got this steel color, and that's exactly what I'm going to use next. Pick out anything that you want to be silver now, and I'm also going to do a little bit of edge highlighting on the armor, on the gold part, just to sell that gold effect. And I'm going to pick out the studs on the staff and on his horns, just to add a little bit more interest to the model, really. You don't have to, it's a completely optional step. Just pick out whatever you think looks cool, really. At this point, the model's pretty much done, and all I'm going to do now is pick out all of those tattoos, and I'm going to do this in exactly the same way that I would do my OSL effect. Now, I want the tattoos to be glowing blue, and the stuff in the eye, I want to be the pink that we've already established as our through colour for the armor. And I'm going to do it in exactly the same way as I do everything else. I'm going to use some white ink, and I'm just going to water that down so it's super thin. This is where you want to be a little bit careful, work your way around the model, use a small brush if you've got one, but you want one with a decent sized belly, otherwise you won't be able to utilise the capillary action of using such thin paint, and you may have to do a couple of coats to get a really high saturation. Once you've done this, then you're pretty much there, to be honest. You could either paint in with some contrast paint over the top, with Mr. Blue, exactly the same as we used in the Soulblight Gravelords. Check out those videos if you want to see a more in-depth tutorial on how to do that, but we're basically going to go backwards and forwards between the colour and white to establish the hotspots. You've seen me do this 1,000 times at this point in the series, so I won't go over that in detail. Instead, let's jump over to the other wizards and have a look at the different colours we're going to use on those. Hopefully this guy's going to look pretty familiar now. It's the same gradient as we did on the Thaumaturge, and what we're going to do is basically the same sort of OSL effect in all of the areas that we want to be glowing. Now, I want to do the OSL for the different wizards in a different way. Sorry, sorcerers, whatever you want to call these guys, the magic dudes. So each one looks a little bit different, and perhaps they could be aligned to different chaos gods, but I don't know. Let's just have a look. Now, I've done a couple of conversions as well for these other two. I do have another wizard, sorcerer, whatever you want to call it, but I've not painted him in this video. Now, these are both conversions. One is a Stormcast, and I think one is a Slaanesh model. The overall method for doing the glow, as I've already said, is going to be exactly the same as what we've used in all of the previous videos. Now, on this model, for instance, we want to use some of that purple, pink fuchsia that we've already picked out, but I do want it to be a little bit different in that I want it to go through a number of colours. So we're going to start off with exactly the same fluorescent pink that we've used, and then we're going to go into a green and then a yellow, and then we're going to come back with a slightly different magenta that's just going to tie it all together. So this guy will be the main wizard that I've got, and then the other ones I'll just swap out as and when for fun. But this is going to give us a little bit of a different take on the OSL that I've done up until this point of this army. I'm going to swap out to this very vibrant green now. Really nice, acidic almost. It's a fantastic colour. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm just going to go with Rule of Cool. I'm going to pick out some elements that I think should be this green colour, and I'm going to go with it. There's nothing different to the process we've used previously, but with the flames, I'm going to blend the green straight into the pink, leaving a little bit more space at the tip, and that's going to allow me to add the other colours on as we go, and then we'll tie it all together. Since we've already got that green in the airbrush, let's pull out one of the other models, and we're going to give this lady a green glow all over the place. I really like this green, and so, well, why not? We will have some pink on her, obviously, because it's what ties her into the wider army. As you can see, I've already done her face guard and one of the runes, but her overarching colour is going to be green. Maybe she's aligned to Nurgle or the Great Horned Rat. On to the next colour, and it's going to be turquoise. Now, this works really well with the green and the yellow, but it also lets us do a really solid base for a blue glow as well. And so I'm going to pull out this other conversion that I did, the Slaaneshi based one, and I'm going to basically do exactly the same thing. Nice and thin in the airbrush, and we're just going to start to establish elements of blue glow on here. Now, this has got less glowing than the other two, but I don't know if I'm going to do some type of effect with the bowl and perhaps a blue liquid, blue ichor spilling out onto the base. I don't know. What do you think? Should I do it? Shouldn't I? Let me know. In fact, stop now. Go and comment. Tell me if I've done it or not, and you'll see at the end. Let me know if you're right. I'm going to swap back to the one that we started with as well. This is going to be as main faction wizard. We're just going to bring a little bit of the turquoise into this as well. Perhaps another glowing rune here or there. Let's get some on the flame, so it looks like it's going through all of the elements of chaos, or I don't know what it is. It just looks cool. It's yeah, it looks cool. It's a nice effect. I'm enjoying it. And of course, we can go backwards and forwards with white to establish some hot spots in this. I'm probably going to go back into the skull, and there's a rune on the forehead, and just pick that out, but it's probably going to be quite subtle, but definitely do that. It's those tiny little details that make all of the difference. On to the last colour then, and with hindsight, this was a little bit too similar in tone to that rose fluorescent paint that we started off with. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. If I'd have thought about this a little bit more, I should have realized that this was going to be too similar in value, but I think this is one of those elements where I made a mistake, I'm going to run with it. I could go back and I could correct it, but it doesn't look bad by any means. It still looks fine. It's just not the effect that I was going for. It is a little bit more saturated than the rose, a darker color, but it's not what I was really going for. And it helps blend it back a little bit, I suppose. So I can't say it was a complete fail. It is absolutely something that I would do differently if I did this effect again and I was going through them. I should have, with hindsight, gone for a purple or a darker, deeper blue, perhaps. What would have you done? Let me know down in the comments. The last thing to do then is to come back in with that thinned down white ink and just establish the hot spots. If you want, you could glaze some of the other colours back in as well, just to blend it together a little bit tighter. Depends on how far you want to take your tabletop standard. Those finishing touches, and we get them on the base to follow the rest of his army. Let's take a look at what we ended up with. So what do you think of this one? I'm on the fence. I'm definitely on the fence. The Myrmidon turned out, I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. I think you can tell from my face, I'm not overly sold on it, but I think it's going in the right direction to something that I could perhaps iterate on further down the line. Perhaps it is one that I'll come back and paint. It's probably not going to see much play in my army, so it's not too much of an issue. However, the Chaos Sorcerers, the three guys that are aligned to the Chaos Gods, I'm pretty happy with those. It was dead straightforward. The OSL technique, you've seen me do it several times already now. That worked pretty well. How have you painted your Chaos Sorcerers? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to see. You can find me over on Instagram as well. If you want to interact with me there, please do. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for this video, and I will catch you on the next one. Hopefully, you'll have a good hobby week, and I'll see you then.